Who cares if we have an intro?
We don't need no stinking intro.
Don't need no strinking. Oh, I have some skepticism.
Skepticism. Yeah, that's a good word, like skepticism.
Yep, skepticism. I have some skepticism.
Skepticism. Yeah.
Oh, did you hear that?
Sorry, that was me.
No,
I
that
was
was me.
flipping over.
That was me. My sound was on. Anyway, what are we doing today, boys and girls?
Apparently, we're testing the relative humidity of a philosopher of religion named
Joshua
Joshua
Yeshua Rasmussen.
Rasputin.
Rasmussen.
Hard to kill.
Yeah, he's hard to kill. Yeah, but we're gonna try to kill him. So, anyway, this guy, I want to introduce him as being very intelligent, very informed, not a creationist fool like some. He is a worthy contender, and he deserves, respect for his ideas. He's written like 5 books, and one of them is, what is one of them? How Reason Can Lead to God was his latest book, and he's got another one. Something about who you are or something. I don't know. I forget what his books are. I probably should link his books, but anyway. So I wanted to, and he's being interviewed by Filter Biblical Clarity in a Confused something. I'm not sure what this channel is. Biblical Clarity in a Confusing World. Okay. Which we all need, right? We all want to be less confused. Anyway, so with that introduction, you want to play it? Should we run a little of his video and see where he's at?
I just want to caution you, though, when you say he's real solid and cool, like like unlike other creationists or whatever. Do we happen to know that he's not a young Earth creationist?
No, I don't know that for sure,
Okay.
but I
So
very much doubt it.
He could be a young Earth creationist, though. Danny is in the he is in the side chat, and he's interviewed him twice, so he may know whether or not.
Yeah,
Rasmussen.
is he a young Earth creationist? He's a dualist, that's for damn sure. And Danny might like him for that. So, Danny, did you interview him on your YouTube channel? Anyway, I'd like to know. No, he's not a young Earth. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't
Well, see, that raises the respectability a little for me.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for this guy. When he talks about philosophy of the mind, he has read the philosophy, so he knows a bit, but he's still all wet. I think, yeah, okay, that's the name of my video. Yeshua Rasmussen is all wet. Joshua. Anyway, ready to roll? Confirmation.
We're ready. We're ready.
Confirmation.
Confirmed.
Sorry, you're just looking for validation. Yes, I'm ready to roll. Now, occasionally you may accidentally hear the sound of a trumpet doing something.
No.
Occasionally, because when I put you on mute, sometimes I'm working on my long tones. So,
Okay, Scott.
So yeah, if you hear I'm going to try to mute it, but if you hear a bad trumpet sound, that will be me, and I'll put it on mute as soon as possible.
Wait a minute. When I hear trumpets, I automatically think God is calling me home.
Well, maybe I'm the Angel Duke.
Yeah, Angel Duke. Okay. And you're very skeptical, right?
I'm a skeptical guy, especially when I hear people say something about psychology.
Right. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off today, but I'm going to try. My mind is very tired. Okay, I'm going to roll some of this. It's his introduction, sort of.
Passion is to try to figure things out at the most fundamental level, whatever I'm thinking about. So my research has been on the foundations of existence. My kind of previous work was on trying to build a bridge of understanding the nature of fundamental reality. And then my most recent work has been looking through the window of consciousness and the nature of ourselves to see into fundamental reality through that window as well. So that would be kind of I would say, my biggest passion is to try to understand things at a foundational level, because I think that can lay a platform for understanding many of the things that are practical to life, like how should we live our lives. If we can understand things at the foundational level, I find that it puts light on my feet for living in this world.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So
basically, he's grappling with the, why is there anything at all? What am I? Where do I find meaning in my life? And he believes that we have to go right down to the foundation of reality to find that. And I disagree with that, of course. But anyway.
Also, what really do you mean by reality?
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question I have. Since I just raised the specter of definitions, I think I read or heard somebody call the discussion over definitions to be a bunch of bullshit. And in some ways, I understand what they mean, but in others, I'm not sure, because how can you have any discussion unless both parties, relatively understand that you're talking about the same thing or something different?
Right.
And especially when you're talking about consciousness, what is consciousness?
When philosophers start talking about the mind and consciousness, they like to spend about 30 seconds defining it.
Uh-huh.
And then they spend about 30 years talking about it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's good to talk about definitions, but maybe it ought to be a thing like write down your definition, put it on the screen side by side, and see if you can find any agreement. Like, I'm thinking about the definition of atheism, how that has prompted tiresome, long, unending discussions about what it is and what it means. But, if you just throw it down there and say, okay, I don't think we're talking about the same thing, then why, is having a further conversation justified?
Yeah.
And so, like, even defining reality, reality is what is real. Okay, but we're talking about concepts, heavily talking about concepts in philosophy. In science, do we just think that we're talking about something more firm and limited than mere concepts? Or, you understand what I mean? I mean, why are scientific definitions any better than a philosophy definition? And are they? Is kind of what I'm wondering.
Yeah, like for mind and consciousness, I always use the phrase, how do we apprehend mind and consciousness, right? In other words, how do we visualize it or observe it so that we can talk about it? And therein lies the whole fucking problem. Now, a lot of philosophers will define mind and consciousness as, it's that thing you have when you're aware of something. And everybody knows what it is, right? But do you? So how do we apprehend it? How do we observe it? How do we know that we have it?
Right.
In order to know that you have it, you have to observe it in some manner. But to observe consciousness presents us with a little bit of a problem, because we're observing it with consciousness, and we are necessarily doing it moments after the fact. You can't observe consciousness in real time, and it takes a while to convince people of that, but it's kind of the reality. Anyway, how do we apprehend consciousness in mind? But he gets into it a little bit here, I think, and I'm at 452. Where's 452? Oh, let's see. Well, let's hear what he has to say. You ready, Scott?
Fire away.
Field of the philosophy of mind is devoted to understanding the nature of minds. But then you might wonder, well, what is a mind?
Yeah.
And actually, this field is thinking of mind in a very broad way to include anything that occurs within consciousness. This will include not just thoughts. We usually associate thinking with our minds, but it will also include feelings, sensations, Philosophers of mind are interested in understanding how sensations could exist. How could they arise? We'll probably talk about this hard problem of consciousness. This hard problem is a problem of understanding how we could explain the emergence of feelings, like the feeling of love or the feeling of happiness, right? How could these things emerge in our world? And so philosophers are really trying to understand what are feelings? Do they even exist? Could it be that feelings are an illusion in some way? Or if they do exist, how did they come to exist? So these are some of the questions in the philosophy of mind. And as I mentioned, my interest in this is rooted in even a more, let's say, like a bigger picture interest in just understanding reality. And so my interest in the philosophy of mind grows out of my area of metaphysics, which just has to do with trying to understand the nature of reality. What is this reality? So that's kind of how I think of my work in the philosophy of mind, connecting up with bigger questions. Obviously, this also connects up to questions that would be of great interest to your audience about the existence of God, a supreme conscious being, and how we relate to God. And that is, in fact, the topic of the book that I wrote most recently. So the philosophy of mind deals with consciousness. Also, it deals...
Okay. So, did he explain what mind is?
I didn't hear that in there, and I never really have heard.
It's like everything you're conscious of, right? And
Well, what about your dreams? Like sometimes you feel like you've experienced things while you're in your sleep state, and that's not really the conscious mind, or do we include sleep states as conscious?
Yeah. And the other thing is, okay, you'll list feelings like I feel love, or I feel sympathy, or I feel pain, or I feel whatever, and then you'll list things that I'm aware of. I'm aware of a tree, I'm aware of the leaves, whatever. And these are all things that we can put words to, and that leaves out a great deal of the picture as far as I'm concerned, but we'll get into that a little bit. Because there are things in consciousness that basically are contained in that whole mind thing that we cannot put words to, nor can we remember them 2 moments hence from when we felt them, right?
Yeah,
Because
my biggest struggle in life is putting expression or names to my particular feelings, or even thoughts sometimes.
Yeah, I know you struggle with that, Scott. I'm aware of your struggle. Anyway,
I'm a struggling bastard, man.
Yes,
I'm a
The
struggling bastard.
the struggle is real.
the struggle is real. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's see. I think I'm going to go ahead and just get a few. Or should we listen to this whole damn thing? I don't know. Anyway, what do you think? Well, let's
I
do
don't know
it.
how long it is. So
It's an hour.
Most importantly, what I want to do is empower the reader on their search to see things for themselves. So I open up with a chapter on the lights that you have, the light to investigate reality. One of the lights is your ability to be aware of your own consciousness, your own feelings, and your own thoughts right within.
Oh,
Another light would...
I left something out very important. Hang on a second here. I want to get back to that. Let me see. Hold on. Also, it deals with 651. Oh, okay. Intention.
I wrote most recently. So the philosophy of mind deals with consciousness. Also, it deals with actions. How do we perform actions, especially if our actions are guided by conscious intentions? If I consciously intend to raise my hand, okay, how does that conscious intention translate into my hand actually moving up? How does that actually work? And so philosophers of mind often work in concert with scientists, brain scientists, neuroscientists, to try to analyze the empirical data in light of a wider set of considerations, which we can probably discuss together.
Okay. So anyway, intention, and that's something where Danny will be screaming in the side chat shortly, that we can't, like, Like, philosophers seem to have a hell of a time with connecting intention, basically, that I intend to do something, with it actually having a movement or having an effect on something physical, like my arm going up, right? But if we look at a worm writhing in the dirt, and extending forward, we don't seem to have the same problem. But we don't believe that the worm is doing it consciously. You see what I mean? So there's kind of a tension there where we think this intention thing is something over and above what the worm is doing when the worm is wriggling through the dirt. Okay? And when you think like that, when you start thinking like that, you automatically invite dualism into your argument. In other words, you've let it in the back door already. And if you don't stop them right there, the dualism will look like the only way that we can think about this, right? Because we've let intention in there. And I think that's an interesting fork in the road where philosophers get off on the wrong foot. When they start thinking about consciousness as emergent, and then you have this emergent field of intention, and then it moves something physical. And basically, and I think Josh, I think his answer to that is that the mind is fundamental to all reality. In other words, all reality, the stars, the fucking dust in the galaxies, it's all mind, basically. It's all grounded in mind. That's how he gets around that. So they introduce dualism at that fork in the road, and then they go ahead and patch it up again by saying, oh, well, everything, even your arm moving, is fundamentally mind. So
What
that makes
my
sense?
question is, what is the state of the earthworm if it's not writhing through the ground?
Yeah. Dead? Nothing
Well,
happened?
let's say it rains and all the night crawlers are out laying on the grass.
Yeah.
What's going through their not mind at that moment?
Yeah. Not conscious?
Because
Maybe. Yeah.
well, yeah, generally a worm, other than reproducing, works the soil. It takes in the soil, it takes its nutrients, it expels the soil, it's good for the soil, aerates the soil, breaks down nutrients, that's what it's doing, but it's not always doing that.
Yeah.
So what's it doing when it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Well, that's the interesting thing.
Right.
It's kind of unconscious at that moment. Like, if you aren't doing anything, nothing at all. Of course, we do this thinky thing where we're actually doing something when we're thinking, right? But we're not moving. We're not, if we're not moving, we're not aware of anything, and we're just sitting there. We're sleeping. We aren't conscious. The best way to fall asleep is just fucking quit thinking about shit and fall asleep. Anyway, but
Or
that's
take some
interesting.
sort of drug that helps silence your brain.
Yeah. But
Or
I
the
think,
guy I just watched that had an NDE, he was in so much pain, he reached the point where he passed out. And then he said it didn't hurt anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, because your body shut it all down.
yeah, you're unconscious.
You're unconscious. But he was still in the mind of, I don't feel pain anymore. He just didn't understand because, yeah, the body shut it off.
Yep. Okay, 7:59.
Most importantly, what I want to do is empower the reader on their search to see things for themselves. So I open up with a chapter on the lights that you have, the light to investigate reality. One of the lights is your ability to be aware of your own consciousness, your own feelings, and your own thoughts right within. Another light would be the light of reason, and then also talk about a scientific approach to organizing the data. And then ultimately what I do is I try to model my own journey to invite the reader to kind of join me in this journey into this inquiry into who we are. The emerging thesis of the book is that who we are is deep. Okay, and let me say a little bit more about that. If you imagine a tree with roots that go deep into the ground, you might wonder, how deep do those roots go into the ground? Consciousness, our existence in a way, is like a tree that emerges from the ground, and we have roots that go deep, deep, deep into the soil of reality. And a question that many philosophers of mind have been asking is, how deeply rooted are we into reality? In the end, I end up drawing out a thesis that would imply that in order for us to exist at all, our roots must go all the way down to the foundation of all of reality. So we don't emerge out of rocks, we don't emerge out of sand, we don't emerge out of carbon atoms. Instead, we
Hey,
emerge
Mike,
out of
stop for real quick.
Yep.
You,
Yep. Right
you
there.
have to clip that right there for Kent Hovind,
What's that?
because he just said we do not emerge from rocks.
Yeah. Well,
And Hovind is always pushing.
yeah.
You believe you came from a rock. It
Believe.
says so in the books.
Right.
So there's a clip for everybody that wants to answer Hovind right there.
We do not come from rocks.
We don't come from rocks.
But he's stating, basically he's claiming that we do not emerge from these things, right? We can't emerge from something physical. And then further, he's going to claim that we have to emerge from something that's basically conscious. And the only thing that can be conscious is a supreme being who has some sort of consciousness, right? Like, the thing that kills me about Christians when they talk about God is they don't want to say up front that, you know, they'll say man was created in God's image, but they don't want to say that God is in man's image when we think about him. That we think about a creator or a super being that has consciousness and intention and will and imagination and all of that, and that's what they think God is. I wouldn't have a problem if they thought God was the cosmos, right? I mean, I do that all the time. But I have a problem when they say that God sits around and thinks about things. Well, when you think about thinking, you do thinking in a linear manner over time. You think one thought, and then you have the next thought, and the next thought, and then you add this little bit of creative thinking, and you sort of have a little recipe that you're creating when you're thinking, right? It's in time. Well, if their supreme being is timeless, how the fuck's he do that?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
How does he do
timeless, but yet it's having a period of
Sequential.
time where it thought.
Right.
Right.
So very much unlike
I'm
what
with you.
we do.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and they sort of like they take this leap in their mind and they think, oh well, it just all happens all at once. You know, it's just in this minuscule instant that he will think the entire train of thoughts all at once. It's like, well, but how the fuck does that work? Because when we think about something, we bring something to mind, and then we take that thing that's in our mind and it inspires another thought, and that brings in another element of it, right? And so it almost happens, but then they'll shortcut that and say, well, that all happens instantaneously. And intuitively, it seems to make sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry. I'm not following their intuition on this. Anyway, the ability, let's see, what do we got here from DeFreak? Just a matter of the ability to access any point of time, any time. Don't forget linear time. That's most important, the crucial element. Yeah, the non-temporal mind is incoherent. We've got Morena. It is. It doesn't make sense. And the unembodied mind makes as little sense, but we'll kind of get to that. But anyway, where were we here?
And the non-physical mind too, because God's not physical either. It's a spirit or whatever. But then how does it have neurons firing and everything? So yeah,
the thing is, Marina, thoughts are changes. An unchanging thing doesn't think, and that's something that's really hard to get your mind around. But basically, we're always like an unchanging thing is not conscious. to be conscious, you have to move from one state to another. It's back to Mary's room. You know, Mary is the neuroscientist that was raised in a black and white room, and Mary never saw the color red. And Mary is 44 years old, and they let her out of the room and present her with a red apple, and she's never seen it before, right? So what does Mary learn when she comes out of the room, basically? It's and I totally lost my train of thought in that process. What the fuck was I talking about? Okay. Do you remember?
I was thinking reality
Oh.
doesn't change even if you don't know about it or think about it.
Okay.
Or maybe thoughts are missed that must condense onto the surface of the mind.
No, my point on Mary's room was that when Mary sees the color red for the first time, there is a contrast in that sensation between anything else Mary has ever seen. And now there are two contrasting things. Like if you were in a pure blue bubble and all you saw with your vision was blue, just one color of blue and nothing else, you would see essentially nothing in terms of color. You wouldn't have any idea what a color was. We learn colors by contrasting colors with other colors and shades of black and gray and whatever. And you know, we recognize everything on this change between one thing and another thing. So it's always comparative. And that's how our visual system works.
What if Mary's colorblind?
Well, then she's fucked. Well, like totally colorblind, black and white. They let Mary out of the room, and she's like, "What do you mean? Nothing's different. Nothing's happening." It's like, oh, fuck, Mary. We spent 44 years. We had you locked in this room, and we didn't realize that you were colorblind. Now what are we going to do? We're going to have to start all over again. Okay, get Zelda. She's only a year old. We'll stick her in the room.
And how much government funding was wasted on that?
Mary learned that she, yeah, Mary. Okay, here's what Mary learned after she's been in the room for 40 years. She's
colorblind.
She's been mistreated and kept in the room for 40 years now as reasonable grounds for a legal case. What Mary's room? I believe that's Jackson that came up with Mary's room.
So what if your parent or guardian is a like a behaviorist scientist or something like that?
Right.
Would there still be a case?
Oh, yes, definitely. Even more so because he should have fucking known better.
Yeah.
Is it a Schrodinger's Mary where you don't really know if she's in the room?
Or B.F. Skinner. B.F.
Right.
Skinner Mary or something. I don't know.
Oh, can you use the Schrodinger defense if you have a kid and you lock the kid in a box for basically 10 years and they say, oh, you had the kid in the box for 10 years? Well, no, I didn't open the box, so I don't know if the kid was in the box or not, because it's like a Schrodinger defense.
They had a Schrodinger meme with obviously the cat in the box. If anybody doesn't know what it is, it's the cat in the box. You don't know if it's alive or not because there's a poison capsule in there. You don't know when it's going to break. And anyway, so it's got the meme, and of course the kitty inside the box saying meow. And he's going shh. You're giving it away.
Let's see, where are we at here? We're at 9:35. Okay, Rock. Okay, what I call the mind. Okay, he gets into his mind first approach, I think,
of existence. And I talk about what kind of stuff that could be in order for us to exist. But that would be the kind of the big thesis, what I call a mind first approach, that conscious being is foundational to all of reality, and that we ourselves, this was an update in my own thinking as I did my research for the book. Before doing the book, I had contributed to the field of philosophy of mind, publishing various articles, and I had been thinking about this topic, not writing on a popular level, but just kind of thinking in the background, even as I was doing my other work. And so I had a general mind first theory in my own mind, but I didn't yet integrate that theory with a theory of our existence, our origin, our minds, how we're connected to fundamental reality. And a kind of transformation or update my own thinking has been to understand our being in the image of God in a way that's very, very deep. That this is not just a metaphor, being in the image of God. That metaphysically, to use that word again, metaphysically, the very nature of us is tied and rooted. Those roots go all the way down into the very nature of God in order for us to exist.
Okay. So he took the fork in the road, basically, which is the dualism option, talking about consciousness as something that emerges from our physicality or whatever, and then he patches it up by just imagining a God that is pure consciousness, that is fundamental to our reality, and that solves the hard problem of consciousness for him. And I say, you took a shortcut there, Mr. Rasmussen. Like you assumed your conclusion and then came all the way around and patched it up with God. And isn't that what they do with the contingency thing with, why is there a universe at all? What caused the universe? It had to be a supreme being. And then you bring in, and when they say the supreme being has to be like a thinking God or a God with will and intention, okay, all they're doing is bringing in this hard problem of consciousness and adding it to that, why is there something instead of nothing? And that's where they totally go off the rails. And they're not doing very good philosophy, even though this man is a really good philosopher and very well read and very intelligent. And as Danny put, very honest, he is still going off the rails at that point. And I don't think he cannot see how he goes off the rails.
To be clear then, does God only exist since we became conscious?
Yeah.
Because before us, there was, let's use the worm, there was worms doing their thing on the earth without us. But
Right.
Are they conscious of God?
Yeah, they were created on the second or third day, weren't they? Or something like that. Like, I don't know. I can't fathom the Christian mind.
Because that's what it's saying to me, is that God didn't exist until we could think of it.
Yeah.
Which obviously, from the non-believer point of view, is, well, obviously once you had an imagination, then you could imagine things.
Yeah.
Well,
can everybody
Yeah.
see where he goes off the rails? I don't know.
maybe you want to emphasize it again for people who
Well, what Scott was saying, you have
get it.
you have to define it, because what is he defining? Yeah, because that's where I'm getting, is that God didn't exist until we could be conscious of it, if it's tied together.
Yeah, it's a thing with intention. Like if we have intention, conscious intention of doing something, how does that translate into mechanical things, right? Well, if consciousness is entirely physical, there isn't a problem with that. You have a physical system, and that physical system is conscious in itself. It doesn't need any added ingredient to make it conscious. Our brains in the world, basically, with all the information coming into our brains right now, from our body, from our senses, from our, from our internal mechanisms in the mind, all of that together is consciousness. It doesn't require an emerging consciousness, and it doesn't require anything from the outside or from the foundation, other than that we are this complex of materials moving through time. And that is consciousness. And the other thing is, we can't be consciousness in a moment. If we were to take our own existence down and freeze it in time, there would be absolutely zero consciousness there. There wouldn't be anything happening. Your thalamus does that to you at night, basically. It starts to shut down everything from around you, and it basically shuts down based on some very basic internal lizard brain kind of stuff. It starts shutting down all of your sensory input, and you, lo and behold, you lose consciousness when you go to sleep.
So
Going to
now,
sleep is exactly like being dead, by the way. So don't worry about dying. It's going to be just like a good nap.
so if everybody was asleep for the same period of time and were unconscious, would God not exist
Right.
during that period of time?
Well, yeah. You see, he thinks that God creates us, or basically it comes the other way around instead of from, that would be like from the top down. He's thinking from the bottom up, that God is always there. And then we are like an afterthought or an after creation or whatever. That would be his argument, I guess. I don't know. But the thing is that, we are this very complex thing. When you think about what we are, the neat thing about what we are is we drag with us our entire past. From the moment we popped out of our mama, or even from when we were a zygote, we started laying down in these neurons, in these synaptic connections, we started laying down an interaction with our past. And when we think consciously and currently today, we are dragging up a bit of time from our entire existence, right? That's how we acquire knowledge and we acquire skills in the world, basically. So
That's what your karma is.
yeah, it's basically your past. And it's really cool when you think about how complex an organism is that can remember an oak tree that you saw yesterday, 24 hours ago, right? That's imprinted on your reality right now. And you're still reacting to that thing. So you have patterns that were created by that seeing the oak tree yesterday that are currently in your consciousness, in your state of being right now. And so we're this little swath of time. And the other thing is that we operate like our mind operates in a swath of time. It doesn't operate in an instant. It always requires change. So something has to be changing constantly with us. And we acquire like a 200 millisecond window where we gather it all together and that becomes our mind. So we're like not creatures that live in this exact moment, this physical moment in time. We're 200 milliseconds back in the past, dragging it forward, and that's where our mind is in this constant changing landscape. And once you get over that, you have a good intuition, and that's why I don't have a hard problem of consciousness. I see myself as that kind of a critter, a critter that's dragging up his entire past. And in the moment, I'm dragging up 200 milliseconds from my past, and that's where I'm living. And they've done this on brain scans where we are not aware or conscious of what is happening right now. We are conscious of what happened 200 milliseconds ago. That is our consciousness. So anyway,
And it just brings up another problem. What we were just saying, everything that makes us what we are is basically your karma. And that again makes everybody extremely, extremely unique from everybody. Just by, like you said, what tree you saw yesterday changes your whole outlook on everything, just because everybody has that unique experience. And then you're back to how are you in the likeness of, or anything that relates to a God who would have to be infinitely diverse at every moment in time too, to equal the consciousness of everybody that's equally diverse.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They flash these subliminal pictures to people. Sapolsky talks about that in his book Behave, where basically they flash pictures of other races other than your own, and then they ask you a question, and it totally influences how you answer it, even though if they asked you if you saw the picture, you would claim you didn't because it happened so quickly. But it left some indelible impression on your on what was happening to you neurologically that you ended up modifying how you would answer that question based on what you heard. Or
So, have you ever heard of any studies based on that? That basketball video where the gorilla walks
oh yeah,
across the court.
yeah.
Does that increase people's? Well, the thing's not doing anything aggressive, but does that increase the aggression or response to questions and stuff? I wonder if anybody's ever gone there with that
Yeah, if they show,
video.
like, okay, if they hand you a cold drink, or they basically hand you a cold drink and ask you to judge somebody, you will be a lot harsher in your judgment because you had a cold drink in your hand. So temperature even affects it. But the gorilla, the thing about the gorilla, that's change blindness or whatever, where you don't see the gorilla walking across the court because what you are consciously aware of is the basketball players throwing the ball around. You don't see the gorilla, right? But now, can you tell me for sure that you were not conscious in any way of that gorilla? You really can't, because you don't know what you were conscious of completely 30 seconds ago, right?
Well, I can for sure say well, no, I'm sorry. I can say I feel for sure that I wasn't conscious of it, but I can't say like with 100% probability that I wasn't. You know what I mean?
Right. You have to put words to it. You have to put,
Yeah,
you
there's
have to
the
put-
feeling of being sure, but then there's the actually what went on in my neurological, my neural networks. I
Yeah.
don't know.
And we're at the mercy of how the brain remembers things, because the brain doesn't actually remember everything. The brain remembers certain things, and then it like fills in the background. Like, we already know what the room looks like, so all it has to fill in is just what I'm looking on the screen right now, and then the brain kind of fills in what my room looks like. So you're always at the mercy of how the brain is remembering things too.
Yep. There's something. This is something I've thought about a great deal and worked on a great deal, and it's kind of interesting. But knowing what you were conscious of 1 minute ago, right? In order to come up with that, and let's see if I can do an illustration. Somehow, I can do an illustration. I don't know. Okay, like you've got all of these, all of these branches, right? That are kind of sticking up out of a murky sea of water, right? This is like a big ocean, right? And these branches actually go down into that ocean quite a ways, okay? And we call this the subconscious, but I don't really believe in the subconscious, right? So we've got, if you look down, okay, if you imagine tree branches sticking out of a lake, like a tree that fell into the lake, and you're looking down and you're seeing the tips of the branches that are sticking out of the water, but then at the same time, you can see kind of under the water a little bit. And as you get further and further down, you can't see them as well, and pretty soon they're invisible. So they're completely invisible, and we call that the subconscious. Okay? But my claim is that your conscious qualia consists of all of this whole thing here, basically, all these branches underneath that you don't have words for. These ones that stick up that we remember, like if I remember what I was conscious of 2 minutes ago, Dave's voice, Scott's voice, right? I'll have a word for that, and I'll be able to highlight that branch, right? But what I don't know is whether the tone that you were using, Dave, affected my consciousness, whether my sitting in this chair did, whether the fact that I got my toes bent under me right now, under my feet, for some reason I'm ready to launch. All of that went into that qualia, or that richness of my conscious experience. And the thing is that as we're going along, I like to draw this timeline, right? So as we're going along, there's two timelines. There's the physical, what's really happening in the physical world. And now, if you're a physicist, you can talk about a moment in time, right? So an event happens right here at this moment in time, okay? And then about 200 milliseconds later, you start to create words for what's happening or concepts, or you start being affected in some way by it. So you have these little points, right? But what you don't see, or what you don't realize, is that this entire thing, even the little tiny things that you don't notice or have words for, all went into that qualia, that sense of what was happening at that moment. And we're this little 200 millisecond swath of time, basically moving forward very rapidly. And when I get out here in my second 200 milliseconds, I'll be damned if I can tell you all the things, all these little dots that were affecting me back then. Now I'm being affected by new dots. And the interesting thing is that one of the dots that I'm going to be affected by, let me get a different color here. How the hell is it colored? Damn it. What's happening? I don't know what's happening right now. Something's happening.
You're not holding your tongue right.
I'm trying to get my note thing to work, and it's not working. I don't know why it's not working. Let's see. I can't get a different color. I'll be damned if I can. Oh, now I can. I don't know why. Hang on a second. Okay, different color. Son of a bitch. That's not what I wanted.
It's
Okay,
a different color.
I wanted a different color. Okay. Where the hell was I going with this? Now I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. As we're moving forward in time, basically, okay, we're now out here, like seconds later, right? You ask me what I'm conscious of. What am I conscious of? And I will start to look around the room, and I'll find things that I was conscious of, like I looked at a minute ago, because I had a word for it and I can kind of remember, or I know what context I'm in. So now when I'm telling you what consciousness is, what I'm really doing is remembering all this shit back here, plus commenting on what's going on currently, right? But now, before I can even answer you, I've gone 200 milliseconds or maybe 5 seconds into the future. So I've totally lost the fucking page. So I can't tell you what I was conscious of 1 minute ago. There is no way that you know what you were conscious of, even right now. In order for me to tell you what I'm conscious of right now, I have to move forward in time 1 or 2 seconds and start creating words and awareness for different things. Like I'll look around and I'll say, oh, I'm conscious of this camera icon basically on Restream, right? And the thing is that when you asked me, I wasn't even conscious of that. I wasn't even looking at it. So this game of trying to say what I am conscious of is impossible. It's as impossible to analyze to experience your own consciousness as it is to see your own eyeball with your eyeball without a mirror. You cannot do it.
And you lose your train of thought like you just did a moment ago. So
And
your
you
brain,
lose your train
in
of
the middle of trying to explain something, your brain decides, I'm going to think about something else.
Can I draw a little choo-choo train here? Yeah. my little train of thought is gone. Yeah, we need a locomotive.
That's always the problem with trusting what you're thinking, is because you think you can trust what you're thinking, but then your brain decides to think about something else.
Right. And the thing is, when you look at what is actually happening in a brain and how a brain is structured, all of this stuff makes incredible sense. It matches, like, okay, what we're doing in neuroscience is we're taking all of those things and we're taking this subjective experience up here. This is our subjective experience, and this is our physical world, right? And we can actually find all the different parts of the brain and how they're communicating with each other, and we can start to draw out a physical map. And if you were to brain scan me while I'm going through this process of trying to figure out what I'm conscious of right now, you would see all of these changes happening in the brain. And that's all it is. That's what we are. We are a complicated little whirl of stuff happening in space and time, and that explains mind and solves the hard problem of consciousness. We're this little swath of happening going on and moving. Does any of that make sense? Like,
it makes sense. It makes sense when you're trying to make sense of it.
yeah.
I was snapping my fingers the whole time, like we were in a old coffee house.
I developed a few thought experiments. Like one of them was, okay, you're immersed in this cube, this room, right? And you're sitting on a chair in there, basically. And I can't draw a man. I don't know what the hell. There's a man.
But I think people are entertained by your drawings. That's the important thing.
That's the important thing. Okay, a little man on a chair, right? And it's in a dark room. And what we have is we have a light up here, okay, in the corner, or a light back here. Say there's a light back there. Okay.
Is there a jumper cable attached to his nipples?
No.
Okay.
We're not doing that today.
I'm just setting the scene.
Release the gimp.
And then we have an apple, basically, sitting on the table, right? But the light's off. So he has no sound, no sensation, whatever. He's in a very comfortable chair. In fact, it could be like a flotation device or whatever. So he has no sensory input. And then we turn the light on suddenly, right? And the light shines on the apple, and he sees the apple, and then we shut the light off. And then we ask him, what were you conscious of? Say, I saw an apple, there, because in the time that we left the light on for a half a second, 500 milliseconds, right? He was able to formulate in his brain that apple word. So he was able to call out the apple, and he noticed, of course, he knows that apples are red, so he dragged that out of his stuff, right? But the thing is that back here, we have a dancing monkey, basically. Little monkey dancing, okay? And when that light shone, if you looked at the apple, okay, if you were to magnify the apple, I don't know, I'm pretty shitty at drawing apples, there would be a little window of light, and inside that light would be reflected that dancing monkey, right? And you'd ask him, did you see the dancing monkey? And he'd say, no. And he'd turn the light on again, and then he sees the dancing monkey, right? But now the question is, was he conscious of the dancing monkey the first time we turned the light on? How the fuck would we know if he was or not? How would he know if he was or not? The only way he knows is because he went through this process of putting words and calling out things and changing his awareness, right? And what I'm claiming is that the dancing monkey went into the qualia of the apple, and it was part of his conscious experience, but he didn't call it out as a concept or a word. And that's why qualia feels so rich. That's why our sensations feel so rich, basically. Because we have all of these sticks that are going down into the depths, and we're sensing all of it at once, right? So that's my little thought experiment. But the thing is that there is no way that this person could tell you for sure whether or not that dancing monkey was part of the experience of feeling the apple. I mean, if you look at an apple, right, it might have spots on it. It might have, different colored areas. All of that goes into the qualia that you had at the moment that the light first went on. But you are not going to be able to talk about it because you haven't had time to put word or concept to it. But it was still part of your experience. So what we experience as human beings is this extremely rich 100,000 elements of sensation going into our experience all at once. But we don't name it all. We don't become aware of it all. The other thing that philosophers of the mind really forget is that awareness is not the same as consciousness. Okay? Awareness is when you focus on something, like when you when you highlight something. Awareness or concentrating. Okay, concentrate comes from concentric, which means you leave out all the shit around you. So when you're just experiencing life without concentrating, without focusing your awareness, you're experiencing the entire apple and the dancing monkey and the chair and everything around you all at once. Anyway, am I preaching?
No, you're simply expounding on something. So,
I expounded.
qualia. Isn't your qualia like, let's say we're both in the same room,
Right.
tied to a chair. There's the apple, there's the monkey. Lights come on. Of course, I will notice things from a slightly different angle, but let's just forget about that and act as if we're experiencing things from the same angle and all that.
Scott, I just got a little rush when you said that you were tied to a chair.
Okay, well, I'm glad I could enhance your consciousness through this thought exercise.
Okay, continue.
Thought experiment. My eyes are shitty, and your eyes might be 20/20. So I don't have that experience of qualia at the same.
Yeah.
Oh, what's it called when your screen is really fine and you like 4D
Same resolution.
resolution. So
Yeah.
that's a what my mind can take and then be aware of is different from what yours can be.
Not only that, but you've had an entirely different life experience with an apple.
Right.
So you may have had a cinnamon sort of experience happening when you saw the apple right away, right? And I didn't.
Or caramel covered.
Or you had a grandma experience or something like that.
Yeah.
But
if both of you were tied back to back, it would be completely different because one would say, I saw an apple. The other would say, I saw a dancing monkey.
yeah, that's
true.
Exactly. Yeah. My claim is that the only thing that is unconscious are the things behind you that you don't see. Everything that you see is in your consciousness, even if you can't call it out or even if you aren't aware of it. It's all part of it. You're seeing the entire field at once, and it is affecting the qualia of that consciousness. But the neat thing is, okay, we have apples, right? And you and I grew up in, wherever with apples, right? Apples being a common fruit. Okay, so we have this commonality of apples. But then there's all this other stuff, right? That's just out on the outside. This, all of these, I don't think you can see that. Maybe I can make that. Come on.
Or if you live somewhere that doesn't have apples, you would have no concept of the apple.
Right. There's all of this stuff on the outside that makes us different, right? And it just goes to varying amounts. But the thing is that we're all brought up in the same physical world. So we all have kind of this, and we have the same bodies, the same biology almost, right? Damn near the same DNA. So we're going to have this commonality. So we all know what the color red is. Okay, and the color red is a real objective thing between us because of how we acquired that color. So the color red for me is the same as the color red for you. And the reason for that is because the color red doesn't go as deep. It's a shallow thing. It's a contrastive experience that we developed by seeing red and blue. And if you're colorblind, it's going to be slightly a lot different. But if you're not colorblind, all humans are going to have the same experience of red. You can be sure that if I were plugged into your mind somehow spiritually, I would experience red the same way you do. Because red has no more depth than that. Red is simply what it looks like when you contrast it with black or blue or yellow. Okay.
Looks like we're going to have Dr. Chris Thompson join us in just a few seconds.
Oh, no, he's going to yell at me.
And then, enter in the other species, though, that see colors differently.
Yeah. There's going to be, because they're going to see the contrast between two different colors in a different manner, they are going to experience it differently. But you and I have pretty much same DNA, same retinal development, same developmental, life, and we are going to have pretty much we're going to see red the same way. And the thing is, people want to add to the red qualia something that isn't there. All that's there is the contrastive stuff, right? And we all have that, and that makes us see red. And then, of course, the interesting thing when I was ruminating on the qualia of seeing red and blue, when I saw red, I immediately thought stop signs, blood. We have that experience of red that all goes into that qualia of red. I mean, red is it's a color that gets us all going. That's why they paint stop signs red, like blood, right? It's something that stands up because we have all these associations. Anyway,
I had a qualia of the note G, and it was a horrible qualia earlier. So I think of music and qualia.
Yeah, music
as being essentially kind of the paradigm, because we all experience music in different ways.
But yet you probably experience it in a very different way because you're a musician, right?
Welcome, Dr. Chris Thompson. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Oh,
Actually, let me change my audio here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
We're definitely paused.
Yep.
We're contemplating philosophy of mind,
I hear that.
theory of consciousness,
Yes.
and other things.
Right.
Yeah, so what do you think of all the bullshit I put forth in the last 30 minutes?
Okay. Can you hear me okay? No, I would definitely not say that it was bullshit. And I only caught like the last 10. Maybe I missed most of it.
Okay.
But I actually totally agree. I actually think you're really spot on. So there's obviously physical attributes, two things that an animal can.
We're not hearing much of what you're saying there.
Oh, really?
So,
Your audio
just lean in, or because I just heard you go. Oh, really?
Is this better?
Yeah, it's much better.
That is. That
All right.
is. Yes.
Let me get my volume up a bit. That might help. Okay. So we obviously have physical attributes that take in the physical sensations of the world, right? Just as you were talking about, right? Light is those are photons. They have physical attributes, and they obviously have certain characteristics that only allow them to do certain things, right? And they're going to act on photoreceptors in a particular way that's very, very physical. Right. And that is going to be consistent across individuals. There's no way around that. So this idea of qualia, that somehow like people experience red in a very different way than other people experience red, I just can't buy that, because so much of this is utterly dependent upon the physics. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, that and the other thing is that it is shallower than you think. I mean, you don't see just red. We're always contrasting it with.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yes. Yeah, we got a red photoreceptor, but that red, we call it red photoreceptor, but it actually picks up photons from a wide range of wavelengths.
Right.
And it's mostly dependent upon the contrast to what's seen in the other photoreceptors.
Yep.
And we know that a typical human is going to have 3 different photoreceptors. Now, color blindness, that's where maybe some of this conceptual idea of qualia can come in. But even then, we can model it and understand it because, this is all utterly physical. Yeah. And we can also assess like the psychophysics of what color contrast is in a person who has 3 photoreceptors versus someone who has 2 photoreceptors. This is like basic stuff. And the people who get so hung up on qualia, they're missing the fact that no, this is actually really quite consistent across individuals. And if it's not, we actually have good explanations for explaining why it isn't. And even then we can model it. Right?
There's this wonderful illusion, and it's called the Hermann grid illusion. And the really, are you aware of what that is? The Hermann grid illusion? Okay, it's
I don't know that one.
Oh, let me see if I can put it up here. Hermann grid illusion. Okay, visit. Let's see if I can visit the site and put it up. Okay, the thing is, it's not an illusion at all. because of lateral inhibition, basically, something in your primary cortex creates this illusion. And so it's not really an illusion, even though the dots aren't there. Okay, except all the cookies. And let me see if I can put this screen up here. Chrome all. Okay, this is the Herman grid illusion. Oh, wow. There we go. Okay, maybe I can make it a little bigger.
Oh, I know this. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what it's called.
Yeah, and it's because, yeah, I know I always forget what it's called myself, but it's because of lateral inhibition that you end up seeing these. I forget how it is exactly. I think you see the dots when there are no dots there, or you
Right.
see something black. Yeah, you see black dots, and there's actually white dots there. And it's
Right.
because of actual, they can actually look at the primary cortex and find lateral inhibition is basically creating the black effect. So there actually is information coming from your primary cortex as if you're seeing black dots, even though your eyes aren't seeing them. It happens in the primary cortex, which is really cool because, I was arguing with idealists about this. And it's like, I forget how the argument went. But anyway, it was stunning that this is an actual physical effect that happens all the fucking time to your neurons. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of
And that's
Yes.
the problem with being an eyewitness, right?
eyewitness.
I'm an eyewitness. There are black dots there, but there's no black dots there.
Yeah, right. And we have a biophysical mechanism to explain this. And it's not like this is different across different people. Like everyone sees this.
Yep.
As long as they have functioning eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
freaking
Because
me
we
out.
know how it's physically structured and we can have an explanation for how it works. The same goes for like the way. So one big thing that the primary visual cortex does when it takes in visual information is that it's not necessarily seeing dots per se, but it's mostly seing edges.
Edges.
And
edge
yeah.
detection. That's really
It's edge detection is like one of the main first things that that at least a good chunk of the primary visual cortex is set up to see. That's universal across all people. Like that's and not just people, animals, like mammals have the same thing. We know that they do.
And the faster I move my eyes, the patterns change all different too.
Right. Exactly.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So when these philosophers start defining what mind and consciousness is, the first thing I like them to admit is that our mind isn't kind of a thing that happens like neurons will fire at a moment in time, right? And of course, they stretch out over time, but our mind is something that happens over a swath of time. That's how we experience it. That's what we can comment on and make words for and make associations with. And the mind-numbing thing is that your mind is constantly moving, even when you're trying to figure out what your mind was doing.
That's right.
I mean, it's like you cannot pick out 1 minute ago and analyze that because it's already happened. You're doing something new now. Now you're thinking about consciousness. So when these philosophers of mind think about mind and consciousness, they're thinking about consciousness and they're conceptualizing it. And then, of course, this guy says, oh my, it must be God.
Yes. Come on. No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. We know these attentional processes as well. That was what my initial comment was, is that, so as you were pointing out, Speed, that you've got all these sensations coming in. You're constantly bombarded with sensations, but the intentional processes basically picks out what's important and filters out most of everything. So almost everything, all that attentional information is essentially lost and refreshed. I mean, if you're talking about vision, it's like on the order of milliseconds. If you're talking about sound, it's on the order of seconds. Touch is on the order of milliseconds. But the things that you attend to, well, those are going to be things that are going to be put into working memory, where you have some sense where you can retain that for some time. So on the order of tens of seconds to maybe a minute or so, or maybe a couple of minutes. And then eventually, like long term, like most of what I'm sensing right now, I will forget in 10 minutes or 20 minutes because I'll be having my attention focused on other things. So that will just no longer be in my long-term memory. There will be certain components of things that I'm doing at the moment that I will remember. And everyone works this way. We know they all work this way.
So what mechanism in the mind makes a person feel strongly that they're sensing just, a huge amount of detail in the environment around them, and
Mm-hmm.
other people maybe with this low amount of chemical X or hormone Y,
Mm-hmm.
that they're just kind of out of it, and not really experiencing things. Because isn't experiencing reality and experience details more of like an impression or a feeling than it is an actuality? Like in actuality, my brain is taking in just the total amount of everything it's going to take in, no matter how I feel. But for some
Sure.
reason, I just don't feel like I'm connecting to all that information.
This
I mean,
relates to depression and serotonin, I think.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, not just serotonin, but absolutely. Like, obviously, that can have a huge impact on overall attentional processes. So I would say that it's not necessarily a sensory deficit, although that can obviously happen to some people. That they can have a sensory deficit, and that's something that can change, right? If you're feeling sleepy or something, your basic perception is going to be low, but mostly it's going to have to do with attention and arousal. So arousal is going to be a key part of how much we can pay attention to our environment around us. And people vary in their level of arousal. There's some people who are sort of not terribly aroused. Other people are generally a little bit more aroused and can be more attentional to the rest of the environment than others. But that also varies across a day, right? Like you wake up in the morning before you had your coffee, feeling a little sleepy. You're not going to be necessarily paying attention to like the toast burning in the toaster. But if you already had your coffee, you'd be a little bit more aroused and woke up. So now you will pay attention to it. At the end of the day, you might be feeling a little bit more sleepy. But then maybe you hear some noise outside. All of a sudden, your autonomic nervous system kicks in. You get a release of cortisol.
Yeah.
Those act on the receptors in the brain that activate to say, hey, wait a minute, actually, we do need to pay attention. And now all of a sudden, arousal is quite high. And now you're very alert and you are paying attention to every little noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you're hypersensitive to every little noise. You're thinking that it is really someone who's outside when they're really not.
Yeah, it's
So
like on TV, you get you'll watch a scene like a training, not a training montage, but just a scene of people being trained, and the guy will go in a room, or the team will go into the room with weapons out, and then something will happen, and then they'll stop and say, what did you see out here? And different people will have different levels of things that they saw, and I'm just wondering, is that not really how it happens, or can people actually come out of the same event and one person it was just so aware, they saw all the clues, they saw all the dangers, but somebody else who will probably be eliminated via natural selection didn't see the dangers there?
Obviously, there's variation in a population.
Yeah.
So that is the nature of biological organisms. Now, you could also argue that people who are hyper aware and hypersensitive to noises in the environment may actually have a deficit in other capacities, right? Maybe it serves them well in certain contexts, but in other contexts, maybe not. Someone who is hypersensitive to their environment, perhaps that would be something that would serve them well in a context where they need to be on constant alert. But in an environment where things are more or less stable, you don't need to be so hypervigilant. Maybe that person is now facing chronic stress, and they don't reproduce as well. They have other deficits, right?
Whereas someone who's a little bit more
chill.
Hypervigilance can actually be a symptom in a disorder such as PTSD or being a victim of some sort of abuse. So,
and in certain contexts, that can serve them well. It does serve them well. Someone who is suffering from PTSD, say from serving abroad, someone who was in Afghanistan, experienced some horrible traumatic event where their buddies got blown up and there's an IED that exploded in front of them. They may actually be served by having that PTSD event if they are in that constant environment. But then once they come back to the United States, this is now considered maladaptive. And it is, because you don't need that level of hypervigilance. It's not like it's something that's going to keep you alive. And in fact, it's making your life worse. You see, and the same thing for someone who's suffering abuse, right? Like someone who suffers enormous abuse, they become hypervigilant. They're highly attentive now to like what reading, say, their abuser, and that actually can be a survival mechanism. But once they leave that environment, then like now they actually suffer a deficit. It's
And I
weird to
want,
think about the PTSD, under those circumstances actually is like a survival mechanism, but indeed it is.
So is one person more conscious than another? And I think from what I've learned, that's not the same thing as consciousness, that awareness.
I would agree. No, it's not. And in
Yeah.
fact, because awareness is dependent upon arousal, and that varies for every single person across the course of a day,
Mm-hmm.
across the course of a week, across the course of a lifetime. And
That's-
so you
that's-
can't use that as a direct proxy. You have to have awareness. Awareness is part of consciousness, absolutely, but it's not, and there's a certain minimum threshold that we need in order to declare someone to be conscious or not. But it's not like as if someone who is more aware or hyper aware, if that necessarily makes them more conscious. I wouldn't say that. I think that we can call consciousness as being some sort of basic minimal standard. There's a great book called The Hidden Spring by, the last name is Moles. What is this? Let me look that up. It's called The Hidden Spring. The Hidden Spring.
Mark Psalms.
Yes, that's it. Yep. Mark Solms, Solms. He's a South African neuropsychologist.
That sounds
Really
very
excellent
familiar.
book. Yeah, it's great.
You mentioned different times of the day and the week.
Yep.
And there's, as an educator, I've heard before that different times a day are better for learning like math or reading and stuff, like with biorhythms and all that kind of stuff, So again, then you have like different times of the day or different times of the month where your brain is more aroused for certain things, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So certainly women can experience this kind of thing with their natural menstrual cycle, but over the course of a day, attentional processes vary because of some of these biorhythms. One thing that a lot of people don't really fully know and sort of overlook is that cortisol or corticosterone, depending upon the species we're talking about, this is the stress hormone. It actually has a circadian pattern to it. So it tends to go down through the course of a day, but it starts to go up just as we're about to wake up. And it's one of the things that just starts activating in our body, getting metabolism, motivating metabolism, getting energy moving through our body so that we start to wake up. And it goes up initially, and then it starts to go down as we go through the course of our day. And it's not that this is like the stress hormone. This is the natural pattern that this hormone has because it's actually a very, very, very important regulator of energy metabolism and energy mobility. And so you obviously, if you're up and you're moving through the course of the day, you need to have energy. And cortisol, you get a surge of cortisol in the morning that does that. So, and that's going to affect attentional processes. And then at the end of the day, when people start to fade, well, one of the reasons that's happening is because your cortisol levels are going down. You're just feeling tired and you need to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and you can't sit there and work on math,
Explains my life.
And
Yeah. Well, I want to know why I want to watch Netflix all day. So
Right.
Would you confirm that as an educator then that
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you, Dr. Thompson.
I have a couple.
Okay, how?
I'm sorry to turn this into an ask Dr.
No.
Chris question.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, I'd have you on here every time we talk about anything remotely to do with neuroscience.
Yeah.
How much of what I'm assuming you've read at least some in philosophy of mind, but how much of what you read there would you say bullshit to in terms of it's what you think its accuracy could be demonstrated in terms of neuroscience? Like, have you seen philosophers of mind just say something that you thought was so ridiculous you threw the book across the room?
Yes.
Or punched the
have,
monitor?
yes.
Okay.
So
I was just wondering what topics or what ideas are those?
Well, the idea of the philosophical zombie is one that drives me insane.
Oh yes. Yes.
This is by David Chalmers, who's, I think he's a philosopher at New York University, I want to say, but he's a British philosopher. I don't exactly know where he's at.
Yeah,
but
Chalmers is he's the guy that invented the phrase hard problem of consciousness.
yes, that's right. The hard problem of consciousness comes from him. Yeah, so
Yeah.
he wrote a book in 1996, something like The Conscious Dilemma. I forget exactly what it's called. But he's written a number of books on this, and he is definitely like,
Yeah.
I don't know, my enemy number one as far as philosophers. and
Oh,
their views
thank
on
you. He's my
consciousness.
enemy too.
Oh, well, it's good to know. It's good to know what the neuroscientists think about the
Uh-huh.
philosophers and what the philosophers think about the neuroscientists. Because whenever I'm going to read a book like that,
Yeah.
Philosophy of Mind, I'm going to go, well, why are they saying this?
Right.
And why? How can you show this philosophical statement in reality?
Mhm.
And
Chalmers he's brilliant, and he does these brilliant arguments against his own position. And then at the end of it, he concludes, "Oh, there has to be some physical thing that we haven't discovered yet that makes consciousness."
Yes.
And
That's what he
he
says.
drives me crazy because if you follow his arguments, he's making brilliant points, and it seems that he's arguing against the idea that consciousness is not physical, and then he concludes by saying it's not physical, and it just drives me fucking crazy.
Right.
But-
He concludes that it's not physical by anything that we know
Right, it has
about
to be a
physics,
special
but there must be
kind of
some
physics.
unknown part of the universe that is
Right.
that it explains consciousness. So he's not someone who's then like, well, therefore God, but he just leaves it completely open to
But
say
Chris-
that like there's something we don't know that has to explain consciousness, and it's essentially basically we have the God of the gaps argument. That's what the theists will
Consciousness of
often
the
argue
gap.
from. I consider this to be a ghost of the gaps argument. So when it comes to consciousness, every little bit that we define and we can describe from physical mechanisms that initially was undescribed or something that was sort of a mystery to us, as soon as we start to explain things about consciousness, well, then they say, oh, wait, okay, well, that's not what we mean by consciousness.
Right.
Consciousness is now, it's not awareness and perception. It's this qualia feature that is the feeling that's underneath. Well, then, I think Mark Solms has this excellent book where he talks about actually consciousness being a result of feelings and feeling mechanisms. And, he walks through the underlying neuroscience for that. And so now, okay, well, now what else are they going to say that it is? So it's not feelings because we have an underlying neural model and mechanism to explain feelings. So then what else is it? I don't know after that. But I mean, they're always going to have some sort of gap. Like there's going to be something that we don't know. And that's the ghost of the gaps. They're just going to put the ghost in these smaller and smaller gaps.
Is this the book here, The Hidden Spring
Yeah.
Journey? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
I just bought it, not them all. But
Okay.
but what you got to understand about Chalmers is that if Chalmers were to accept that it's just physical and it's and explainable, he would be out of shtick. And
Yes.
because that's his whole goddamn career,
Mhm.
based on the hard problem of consciousness.
And the worst part is that he's done interviews with guys at the Discovery Institute. I mean, they love this crap.
Oh, they love it. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
that's where we started out with this Joshua Rasmussen, a brilliant philosopher, really good guy, very honest in his inquiry, but he just just absolutely has to have that God. He basically has made consciousness a God, and then concluded that God is necessary for consciousness, that sort of thing.
What? Okay.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Robert Sapolsky's Behave book?
So I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it yet, but I know Robert. I mean, I've met Robert Sapolsky when I was a graduate student. He came to the University of Washington and gave a talk. Really great guy. I mean, obviously he would remember who I am, but yeah, he's fantastic. And I need to read Behave. Yes.
Yeah, I did 8 chapters while I was driving to and from north this weekend, and it is really cool. And I want to read it again, basically read it with a notepad, so I can connect all the brain regions up that he was talking about. But yeah, he gets into cortisol and very heavily in how
that's a big part of his research has been on the role of cortisol and its regulation of how different brain areas can respond to say chronic cortisol. And he studied this in baboons, and he's also studied this in rodent models. And so he takes several months out of his year. I think he's at Stanford, but he will go to Africa and study baboons in the wild. That's part of his research. It's really cool.
I have a question that's kind of out of left field. But
Mhm.
when I'm falling asleep sometimes, I will get a brain crash sort of thing where I hear my son calling me,
Mhm.
Dad, from upstairs, and
Mhm.
I'll wake up and my son has not called me. But
Mm.
when I have an audio hallucination as opposed to a visual, it seems far more real to me
Mhm.
than visual hallucinations I'm familiar with, and I can
Mhm.
just, oh yeah, I was hallucinating. But audio, it sticks with me, and I actually have to walk up the steps and find out if he called me
Mhm.
because it's just, why is that? Why would an
I
audio
think,
hallucination be more eidetic?
yeah, I think it's because they're they're less material in that, like, they're
Yeah,
not right in front of you, so you can get that immediate confirmation.
right.
And if
We're
you're and
very
if for
visual
some,
animals.
yes, exactly, right? And that they don't reify as 3D objects in our environment necessarily, except
Right.
that, we do use it for some localization, but not like the way we do for visual processing.
Yeah, and
I
it's
would
That's
think
fun
an
and
audio
imagined.
hallucination also um, creates more arousal
Yeah,
because
yeah.
well, that's
audible
interesting.
audio stuff, that's the stuff of night where you're in your camp and
Yeah.
Mm,
you hear stuff out in the dark. Is it an enemy? Is it a beast?
yeah.
Yeah, but
You
the thing
got to
is,
check it out.
with something audio, it's there and then it's gone. You can't look at it again and compare it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. With a visual thing, you need to see some sort of persistence or something that
right.
confirms with like um your overall, like your grasp on reality. You could imagine if like a pink bunny shows up in your vision, you'd be like, well, okay, that's obviously not real.
Right.
But if like you had a brief flash of like you think you recognize someone, but then that person's not there, then you're like, okay, I guess my mind's playing tricks on
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
what
that
if
you have
you're in
that
the
quick check on
jungle and
reality.
yeah, what if you're in the jungle and you think you see a 20-foot or just an anaconda, going through that little piece of brush in the clearing or whatever? You're going to be hyper aware.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Right.
for a little while.
Right.
you
You're
hear
gonna
the scurry. I used a visual example. Let's turn that into a hearing example. You think something is scurrying like a snake
Oh
uh,
yeah,
in the bushes close to you.
that's scary.
Mhm.
Plus,
Yep.
there's the parental bond too. If you think you hear your child, uh, you're just going to attend to that and
Yeah.
be more
Right.
aware of
you
it
get
than
Right.
if you think it's Mary Lou's baby crying and
Sure.
in the
Well,
house
even if
next
you,
door.
let's say you had a brief vision of your child, right, in your room, but then it disappeared, you might, okay, but wait, maybe they are in here, but then you might quickly realize, wait, okay, that wasn't exactly right. I think I'm
Right.
just seeing something. But if you
Yeah.
just had a quick audio hallucination, we don't have any reason to doubt that initially because, like,
Yeah.
you got to go check
And you
because it's
remember it.
there and then it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you get an adrenaline rush too, especially with
absolutely.
a
There's
loud
that too.
noise,
Yeah.
and whoa, and your
Mhm.
heart's racing, and
I
yeah,
think
so
it's
you're
I think it's
hyper aware at that moment.
Right.
I think it's
And just like
hilarious.
you were saying, Scott, that like it's part of the surveillance of the environment. So you are attending to these sounds. We always are. We're constantly on the scan for them, um, even if we're unaware of it. But because if there is some sort of loud noise, well, that means we got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Whereas like our visual attention, actually things can pop up in our vision, and of course we got to attend to that too. And we have certain neural circuits that are responsible for attending to those those things that arrive in our visual field immediately. Um, but like that's going to be a little bit more of a consistent thing that obviously persists in our vision, so we can attend to it. Right? If it shows up in our visual field, we can look at it and analyze what it is. And if it disappears, well, then it's like, okay, maybe I guess my brain is playing tricks on me.
So 20 years ago, when I was in the throes of my addiction, I did an experiment. I stayed up for 9 days without sleep, and I saw a 12-foot troll in my backyard when it was really dark out. And I was out there, and
That was Bigfoot.
yeah, I think it was Bigfoot, but I think it was some pattern with the oak trees or whatever. But anyway, it looked like a 12-foot troll, and I said, "Okay, I know you're not there, but I'm going in the house anyway." So it was, but try staying up for 9 days and watch
Yeah,
to visual hallucinations. They're incredible. You see
I bet.
snakes running across the road, and I call
Oh
them
man,
road rabbits. Road.
No, I don't know if I want to play with that.
Yeah, right. Well, I am so glad that I was an addict because I experienced so many things that I wouldn't ordinarily have experienced
True.
subjectively.
That's something you don't hear every day, but I understand what
And
you're saying.
no, I'm really thankful for my addiction in my life. I would not be who I am today without it. I'm glad I
Sure.
went through all that bullshit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Through it is the important part. I am through it.
If you say in Jesus' name, did they go away?
Yeah. I should have tried that on the troll. I don't think that would.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, Dr. Thompson,
Yes.
I'm looking here on your YouTube channel, and
Uh-oh.
I see that a very excellent neuroplasticity video you did about a month ago,
Right.
and then a good question about brains and neurons 3 months ago, and then in May of this year, you had you just basically reposted a debate with a young lady who's I guess a doctoral student named Taylor.
Taylor.
On intelligent design.
Oh no, you talked to Taylor?
Yeah, what are your
I
thoughts
did.
about that debate? And if
Oh,
you want
man.
to share some of them with us, your thoughts may have matured since May, and we would like to benefit from them.
God, that debate was a real shit show, just to be frank. Because the debate was supposed to be on intelligent design on trial. Okay, so the point that we're going to be talking about is what is the evidence for or against.
Okay, we've lost you a little bit.
You're muffled again.
Yeah, you got muffled.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
No, you're gone. You're
I'm
gone.
gone again.
Oh, now
All right,
you're
Now
back.
you're back.
I'm back. Okay, good. Now I'm back. All right. So that debate was a real shit show. Okay. It was supposed to be on intelligent design on trial. That was going to be the topic. And so we're going to talk about evidence favor and against intelligent design. And it was a nightmare because all she wanted to do is talk about abiogenesis.
Right.
And I did not come to talk about abiogenesis. I wanted to talk about intelligent design. And so most of the debate was about trying to define the contours of like what the debate is about, which kind of makes it a huge waste of time, honestly. She's a real piece of work, though. She was pretty nasty through a lot of it.
She is.
Yeah. So not very nice. She did reach out to me a few weeks ago. I wrote her pretty soon after that to be like, hey, do you want to have a follow-up discussion? Talking about, I wanted to discuss common origins or common designer. And she didn't even reply, but then she replied like, oh, why didn't you want to debate me on abiogenesis? And I was like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you. So whatever.
Yeah,
it was a nightmare.
We had her on the channel once a while back when she first came onto the scene,
Mhm.
and it didn't go too well. But
Yeah.
yeah, she was on John Maddox, I think, found her and brought her in, and then she ended up being on a whole bunch of channels for about 2 weeks, and then she kind of got embarrassed, I think, out of appearing. I don't know. Anyway,
Gotcha.
she is something else.
Yeah.
I have some. I would like to go back and get some Taylor highlights because she said some amazing things.
So
I would like to see that.
Are you just like way too busy for your YouTube channel now, or have you lost
At the
interest in
moment,
the enterprise?
yes. I have not had the time to do it. So I'm coming up for tenure this year. And yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, that doesn't mean I'm going to get it. I mean, I have to apply first.
All hail Bigfoot that you get it.
Yeah, thank you. I hope the Bigfoot comes through for me.
Do you need a letter of recommendation from any of us?
That might help. It might be better than ones I get from my colleagues.
once you have tenure, does that mean you can beat your students if you want?
Yes, and without any consequence whatsoever. Yes. I shouldn't joke like that. Of course, that's not true. Please don't deny me tenure because I said
that used to be true when I went to college. We had a professor who said things that would have, like, were just so over the top, racist and bigoted and sexist. And he said them on the first day of class, basically in physics class, and Mr. Hurd, his name was, and he would have gotten run out of town on a rail today.
Oh,
he
for
got
sure.
away with it because he had tenure. Yeah.
Nope.
Something
Yep.
else.
And you can get in trouble even with tenure. You
Yeah.
have to do a lot to lose your tenure, but you know, they'll scrutinize so much of what I do, and obviously the big thing is productivity. So I'm behind on getting some papers out. So that's what I've been really focusing on. I'm also teaching a new class, which is eating up a lot of my time. That's frustrating. It's on mechanisms of memory, so now I know even more about memory than I did before.
Nice.
Yeah, so I've actually, so it's funny, you know, I haven't had enough videos, but believe it or not, I taught over the summer. I taught a neuroplasticity class, and that was all online. And I made videos for my class, but my plan was to edit those videos and release those more publicly. But I just haven't had time to go back and do those because now I'm also working on my mechanism and memory class. And my students, they like the videos, so I've been making videos for them, but I don't make them public. So the
Right.
funny thing is, you say I haven't made any videos, but I've actually made like 20 some videos over the last summer, like in the last 3 months.
Hey,
They're
put
just
them on
for
your
my
channel.
students.
On a
Yeah, I
playlist.
should just release them on my channel at this
Put 'em on
point,
a
especially the
playlist.
neuroplasticity ones.
So have you heard anything about psilocybin and increased neuroplasticity
Yeah, I
in
have.
the month after?
Yes.
What the hell would cause that? So you get a supercharged amount of serotonin, and it
Mhm.
primarily acts on the pyramidal neurons,
Pyramidal.
pyramidal neurons, and it ends up creating a lot of interconnectivity on layer one of the cortex, I think.
Yep.
It is what they hypothesize, but I wonder why that would lead to increased neuroplasticity.
Well,
Dendritogenesis, synaptogenesis, and neurogenesis, they claim. Yeah.
so, okay, I don't know about studies showing psilocybin increasing neurogenesis. I suppose that I should look.
In the
There could be
hippocampus.
studies on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be in the hippocampus because that's the only place where there's ongoing neurogenesis
Well,
in
they
adults.
found a little bit of trace evidence that it happens in other areas of the brain too.
This
but
is
very rarely.
true. Like, there's some evidence that maybe striatal neurons also undergo neurogenesis, and maybe a couple of other areas. And we do know that in non-human mammals, or I should say non-primate mammals, that there's ongoing neurogenesis in the olfactory bulb. But that's because our olfactory bulbs really suck. Like, we're not very olfactory sensitive.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that there's probably ongoing neurogenesis in the striatum as well. I do believe that. I think that there is. I think it's relatively low. And I think that maybe as we age, it might just get lower and lower to the point to it becomes very hard to detect, if not completely undetectable.
Right.
But we definitely know that there's ongoing neurogenesis in the dentate gyrus in the hippocampus. I could imagine psilocybin would increase that. But yeah, psilocybin, it has this huge, it has a huge effect on the serotonergic system. And, neuroplasticity can manifest itself in many, many ways. Obviously, one of those is enhanced dendritogenesis, so making new dendrites and adding new synapses, the gaps between neurons.
Right.
And so, psilocybin changes overall serotonergic drive. And we know serotonin is a major neuromodulator, allowing neurons to be more likely to fire. So yeah, those pyramidal neurons. And I know that there's a huge serotonergic input up into like layer one, where there are dendrites and axons of various pyramidal neurons that make up the cortex. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that we would see an effect of increased dendritogenesis and synaptogenesis in those areas.
Yeah.
Probably other areas too. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really stunning about the research they're doing is the numbers that they're coming up with PTSD treatment. I don't know if they're overinflated or if their studies are, but they're coming up with like 80% cure rates, are calling it, basically, for PTSD.
Wow.
Like
So I know one
time cure.
awesome cure that's coming about, also helping with PTSD, is use of ketamine. So
Oh, yeah.
ketamine treatment, has become a very effective
Yeah, I was at
way.
a seminar on ketamine therapy this weekend in
Oh, cool.
Minneapolis. So, yeah.
Cool.
And
All right, gentlemen, I'm sorry to say this. I got to get going because I got to leave in a half hour. I got on here because I was like, I like to check in with Speed of Sound occasionally. And,
you need to check in more often.
Yes, I do. I'll pop in. I'll listen to you guys for a bit and I'll work. But then I was like, I'm gonna just comment and you know, and then maybe get distracted, and here I am. So, but I do need to finish before I have to go. So
I think you've had a therapeutic level of break. So I think this is the perfect amount of time for you, and you're going to find yourself more productive and more confident about applying for your
my tenure.
Tenureship,
yes, and I certainly feel aroused, but not in a bad way here, gentlemen. Thank you.
And those papers are practically going to write themselves.
Exactly. So the yes, exactly. And the other thing is, like, your point about not having enough videos out, I totally agree. I'm getting the itch to get back into doing more YouTube stuff. I also appeared on Grayson's channel like last week, and I was like, oh
awesome.
man,
I'm gonna have to go look that
doing
up.
this. So yeah, he had a creationist on that I was arguing with, so
that's even better.
Which scratched the itch a little bit, but I want to get back more.
I wasn't criticizing you for not having enough.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Noting that you know there hasn't been much, and why is that? Simply because just wondering where you're at these days.
I've got a fair amount of content banked that I just need to edit and then put out, and I don't think I need to edit it all that much.
Well, I was looking at some 3-year-old content on there that looks darn fascinating as well.
Cool.
I think a lot of people need to go to your channel, which is Dr. Chris Thompson, and take a look at some of the old material and learn some stuff about neuroscience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Coming on. Got to run. See you guys. Good chatting with you.
Thank you, Dr. Chris.
Yep. I think we all got to run. I think it's time to shoot her in the head, guys.
Well, wasn't it great to hear from Dr. Thompson?
Oh, it was. Yes. And we have a lot of agreement. Oh, we both hate Chalmers. That's great. I have a Chalmers poster that I use as a dartboard, and I use it in target practice. So.
Oh, and speaking of heads, I told you guys I was playing around with the AI. The little avatar here is something I created too.
That is nice.
That's a very nice avatar.
Can I make
it's a lot of fun.
I wish my brain were that pretty.
How do I make somebody big? I don't know how to make somebody big.
Well, you feed them a lot.
Well, no. I mean, I want to make big.
I need that.
Put them up there.
Shot.
If I put them up there and then I do this, oh, I made them big.
There you go.
How about that?
Pretty cool.
Okay, guys, I'm kind of burnt out, so I think we're going to shoot her in the head.
Well, this
Good
was
talking
great.
to you.
Yep.
And I know we got off the subject of Rasmussen and why he was all wet, but then again, we got off into some nice tangents, and I think those are beneficial as well.
I think Rasmussen, what is his name? Rasputin?
Josh Rasmussen.
Rasmussen. He's on my radar, so I'm. Some of his content on basically philosophy of the mind is really worth watching. Very educational. So and he's really a nice guy, and he's very humble, and he's not crazy. He's not over the top. I can't say enough good things about this man, but I just disagree with him.
Well, we do know that he's not a young Earth creationist, so I'm willing to walk with you down that path.
Right.
However, where is he with those Ouija boards and aliens? That's going to be my next criteria.
Yep.
We're gonna find out because I got one.
Okay, guys, we're gonna shoot her in the head.
Let's do it. Let's take that shot.
Okay, goodbye, cruel world.
Thank you, everybody.